Our message this week is Paper to Person, spoken by Rob Mason.
Hi guys, it's good to be with you again. It's been a little while, but hey, wherever you're listening from, it's just good to reconnect with you. And I've got a message today, and here is the title: Jesus came to heal your shame. So at the very least, you're probably thinking, oh, that's interesting, curious. But when you look at the ministry of Jesus, and let's say Jesus healed the blind, it was very obvious. Number one, the man was blind. That's obvious. When he was healed, he could see. When Jesus healed someone who was paralyzed, again, it's very obvious that they're paralyzed. It's very obvious when they're healed. They're walking and leaping. I've been working in aged care for a few years, and I've had a couple of residents that I got to know, and if they were blind, it's not a very hidden thing. You can see, you can look at their eyes, you can tell they're blind. We've got people who are bedridden. We've got people who are in wheelchairs and they cannot walk because of a stroke or some other disease. And it's so obvious. But when we read that Jesus came to heal our shame and we look at the Gospels, it's not so clear, because shame is, well, it's a little bit more hidden. It's a little bit more subtle and unclear. So let's ask the question, first of all, what is shame? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And as a person who has struggled with shame, and as a result, I've written a book called Shame Off You, my journey is I've come to realize that shame, if you could summarize the very essence of shame, it is tormenting inferiority. You could almost say, here is a way of summing up what shame is. It's where you feel inferior. In other words, fill in the blank. I'm not blank enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not spiritual enough, etc., etc. So there's this sense of which somewhere down the track, maybe throughout childhood, we've been looking at other people, comparing our lives with other people. We perhaps have gone through some sort of childhood trauma, certain events, and over time, we have come to a conclusion that we are less than other people. We don't measure up to other people. We don't belong. There are a number of things that can cause shame, or I like to just call them shame triggers. For some people, it's because of an addiction. They've got some sort of addiction. They're trying to numb their pain. They're trying to find comfort because of brokenness and other issues in their life. It could be gambling. It could be alcohol, pornography, or whatever it is. And as a result of that behavior and feeling trapped in that behavior, especially people of faith, they then feel shame. Because of their behavior, it's like my life is out of control and I have this sense of inferiority. If people knew my addiction, they would be so disappointed in me. As a pastor, I've talked to many people who have experienced sexual abuse. And even though they were innocent in that abuse, and quite often it's a person they knew, it could have been a family member. Tragically, it can also be a pastor, a clergy, someone like that. And even though they were young, and even though they were deceived and seduced into this horrific act, they feel not only guilty is when you said, oh, what I experienced was bad, they experience shame. I am bad. I have been defiled. Somehow they believe I have played a part in this, or this is something I deserved. For others of us, it could be body image. And this is a common one, especially with social media where everything is so plastic and covered up and there's filters, but we can feel it could be your nose, it could be your ears, you could be short, you could be too tall, it could be body weight, all these different issues, and you're looking at other people and you feel inferior. Oh, I'm not as strong, I'm not as pretty, I'm not as handsome as that person. And so there's this sense of we're living with shame. We're going to look at a passage in the Bible where Jesus speaks to a woman whose life has been paralyzed with shame. We won't find the word shame like we will with a person who is blind or paralyzed. As I said before, shame is very subtle. It's not as clear. It's a little bit mysterious. But as we look at the life of this woman, you don't have to be a psychologist to realize, without a doubt, this woman lived daily, maybe decades, with shame. So if you like to turn, if you've got your Bibles, John chapter 4, it's a conversation Jesus has with a woman, we don't know her name, John chapter 4, and it's the first 42 verses. I'm not going to read it all. I'm going to refer to a few key verses, but to give a little bit of context, if you can imagine, Jesus has been in Judea. It's a region in the south. Let's say it's the equivalent to living in Victoria. Jesus has been working in the south. He's been busy. There's been lots of spiritual conversations. There's been teaching. There's been healing. He's probably had debates and conflict with religious people. He's absolutely exhausted, and he has to go back to his home base, which is Galilee, the equivalent of traveling to Queensland. Now, for most people going from Victoria to Queensland, they're going to go straight through the middle through New South Wales. But for a lot of Jewish people living, say, working in Judea, going back to Galilee or Galilee to Judea, they will never go through that middle region called Samaria. There's a lot of history. We're going to look at that in a moment. But the story starts off with Jesus leaving Judea. He arrives in Samaria. It's a little village called Sychar. And John, who's a disciple of Jesus, and he gives a number of details in this narrative that are very important. In verse 6 and 31, John makes it very clear that Jesus, the Son of God, he is fully God and fully man, but in his humanity, he is hungry, he is thirsty, he is utterly exhausted. He's sitting at a well, and another detail, it's no ordinary well, it's Jacob's well. And the disciples, it's almost like they say to Jesus, Jesus, let's go into town. It's about 1 kilometer's walk. Let's go into town and we'll get something to eat. They're concerned for Jesus. They know he's very tired, he's hungry. And Jesus said, no. I'm just going to stay here at the well. You go in, you decide whether you have McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, KFC, whatever it is. You go and I just need to be alone. Jesus is exhausted. I don't know about you, but when I'm exhausted, whether it's family issues, whether it's working in aged care or when I was a pastor, just seeing lots of people and preaching and dealing with conflict and disappointment, there are times emotionally we are depleted. And it's during those times we can be vulnerable. It's those times we think, all I need now is I need something heavy to drink. I need to eat a lot of sugary food or salty food. I need to watch a lot of TV like Netflix, whatever it is. But our priority when we're exhausted is self-preservation, but not Jesus. He's exhausted, yet there's this sense of focus, anticipation, a deep belief, I'm meant to be here. The Father is at work. And along comes this unnamed Samaritan woman. She enters the scene. She's doing her daily menial task of drawing water from the well. As I said before, it's no ordinary well. It's Jacob's well. And so this is a place filled with rich, sacred history. This is a plot of land that Jacob gave his son Joseph. This could be a well that Jacob dug himself. We know in the Old Testament, the formation of this new nation called Israel, the patriarchs or the ancestors of this new nation was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There are times God would refer to himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here is this woman, a Samaritan, not associating with Jewish people, for example, in Judea or in Galilee, but she's going to a place that has spiritual significance. And as we unpack this story, we'll notice a number of things about this woman, and even with the most basic understanding of shame. Shame is tormenting inferiority, feeling we're not good enough or spiritual enough. This woman had a number of shame triggers. So let's look at this person. Number one, she is a Samaritan. And for centuries, Jews have despised and hated Samaritans. I mean, they don't like Romans because they're under this Roman Empire who are oppressing them. But the thing about Samaritans is they actually have some Jewish blood in them, but they're a half-breed. And you've got to look at their history where the nation of Israel were divided into two. In the northern part, they started intermarrying with Assyrians and other people, and they became a mixed race known as Samaritans. So in the religion of Judaism, if you were a Jew, you're in. If you're a Samaritan, you're out. You're an outsider. So number one, this woman knew, I am a Samaritan. Here are the Jews. Here are the Samaritans. I don't quite measure up to this purity of having Jewish blood. Number two, she is a she. It's not just a Samaritan, it's a Samaritan woman. And throughout history, even in religion, women have been tragically victims of discrimination, intolerance, prejudice, exploitation, sexual abuse, and domestic violence. In the first century alone, Aristotle, a Greek philosopher who influenced a lot of Jewish people, he said this about women: a female is a deformed male. Josephus, a Jewish historian, said a woman is inferior to her husband in every way. So for her, not just to be a Samaritan, but a Samaritan woman, there's this sense of, I am inferior. I'm not a Jew. I'm not a man. I am a Samaritan woman. But then we find out about this woman through this conversation with Jesus that she is sexually immoral. This unnamed Samaritan woman has 5 failed marriages in her wake. Now, 5 is more than Kim Kardashian. She's had, I believe, 3 marriages. Elizabeth Taylor had a lot more of that, so she's not doing as bad as Elizabeth Taylor, but we're talking not Hollywood in the 21st century. We are talking about Judaism in the 1st century. This woman has 5 failed marriages. Marriage is such a bad thing for her, she thinks, for number 6, forget it. We know through her encounter with Jesus, she's now just living with a bloke. So notice the first 2 shame triggers. She's a Samaritan and a woman. They have to do with genetics. And sometimes for us, some of our shame is a result of genetics. It might be a disease. It might be our nationality, the color of our skin. There could be some sort of disability, body image, our nose, our height, our weight. It's got nothing to do with us. It's just genetics. Genetics can cause shame. But this woman can't just blame genetics. Somehow along her life or throughout her life, she went from marriage to marriage to marriage. We don't know why. We don't need to know why. But in Judaism, she would be seen as an adulterer. Married, divorce, and now she's in a de facto relationship. So among her peers, she is despised and hated, just like Jews despise and hate Samaritans. This woman doesn't belong anywhere. And remember I said John is a person with details. Well, he now writes that this encounter with Jesus when she's getting her water for her de facto and maybe children, she's doing it during the 6th hour or at midday, the hottest part of the day. Why does John bother to mention that? There's got to be a purpose. And most people would agree she went during a time where there weren't any other women drawing water. With all of her shame, she's trying to avoid other women. She's hiding. She feels so despised. I'm going to go at the hottest and quietest time of the day to draw water so I don't have to hear all of the snickering and all of the gossip and those looks from the other women. So how does Jesus help this woman to understand that her life has been paralyzed with shame? And then how does Jesus heal the woman's shame? So let's go to the beginning of the conversation in verse 7. And it starts off very simple. Jesus just says to the woman, will you give me a drink? Now, it doesn't say please, but I'm sure Jesus, in his tone of voice, was very polite. And it's intriguing what Jesus is doing at the very start of the conversation. He's finding common ground because the woman has shame. She feels inferior. So there's a sense of here I am with a man. So he's a man. I'm a woman. He's a Jew. I'm a Samaritan. This man, I'm assuming, is pure. I've got 5 failed marriages and I'm in a de facto relationship now. And that Jesus doesn't talk about any of that. He just says there's something we've got in common. We both need water. You've come to the well because you're thirsty. I've been walking for a few hours from Judea. I'm sitting by the well. I've been waiting for someone to draw some water for me because I'm thirsty. So in other words, with all of our differences in life, of which some of those differences have caused you shame, the fact is we're both thirsty. We both need water. And when we drink water, in a few hours, we're going to need to drink more water. So I believe right at the beginning, the woman would have felt very relaxed. But then there's more going on, and you need to understand a little bit more about first century Jewish culture, that for a man to ask a woman for water could have been seen as being flirtatious. Now, a husband could ask his wife for water, but for another man to be asking a woman that he doesn't know for water could have been seen as flirtatious. Jesus even having a conversation would be seen by some religious people as scandalous. But Jesus is saying, let's put all of that religious stuff aside. Will you get me something to drink? Now, the woman's going to let Jesus use her bucket. She's probably going to let him use a ladle or something to get the water from the bucket. And that would be seen as scandalous. That a Jewish man is about to use the same utensils as a Samaritan woman. By some standards, Jesus would not be able to go to the temple. Jesus, the Son of God, would not be able to go to the temple because he would be seen as spiritually unclean. He is in Samaria. He's got Samaritan soil on his feet. He's talking to a Samaritan woman. He's about to share water with her. And so I believe at this point, she's very relaxed, somewhat at ease, somewhat curious. And then Jesus says, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. I'm sure the woman has never heard anything like this. Every chance the disciples have never heard Jesus talk like this. He's talking about physical water. This is something we need. But Jesus saying to the woman, there is other water available to you. And if you drink from this water that I'm offering you, you'll never have to drink again. You'll never be thirsty again. Jesus is now building the scene. He's about to really enter deeply into her brokenness by starting with the facts. He talked about water. He's now talking about spiritual water. He's now going to share the facts about this woman's situation and her shame. He's going to bring all of these things that have been secretive. He's going to bring it graciously to the surface. And this is how he did it. Go call your husband and come back. Why do I need to get my husband? There must be something, he believes there's something my husband needs to say. But then she realizes, and truthfully, she says to him, I have no husband. Now, she could have lied to Jesus. She doesn't know he's a prophet yet. She could have said, oh, my husband's at work. Yeah, he's got a business trip. He won't be back for a couple of days. Or, oh, my husband's really sick. He's been in bed for a few days with the man flu or whatever. She just says, I have no husband. Jesus says to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. Listen to Jesus. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. In this moment, the Samaritan woman realizes this Jewish man is different. He knows everything about me. He's just talking about the facts. When I saw a therapist, we were looking at the facts. What could be some of the things that have caused shame to come into my life? What are some of the traumas? What are some of the misconceptions? What are some of the events? What is my self-narrative? What is the story I'm telling about myself day after day? Jesus stays with the facts. You've had 5 husbands. The person you're with now is not your husband. I know you and I accept you where you are. You have been living in secrecy. You're coming to the well at the middle of the day because you want to avoid all the women. I'm bringing this to the surface, but I'm starting with the easy part. I'm starting with the facts. You have had 5 husbands. You're in a de facto relationship. I'm exposing your brokenness, all of this hidden life. I'm exposing, not to judge you, not to condemn you, but to say to you, shame off you. Enough of living in secrecy. Enough of saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not holy enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not righteous enough. Enough of saying enough. Then he goes for the truth. Here are the facts. 5 failed relationships. You're in a de facto relationship. Shame is in your life. It's weighing you down. It's causing you to live in secrecy. Here is the truth. The Father is seeking people like you to worship him. Huh? My Father is seeking people like you, people who are broken, people who are living with shame, who know that they're living with brokenness. They know there's shame in their life, but I'm here to tell you the truth, and the truth will set you free. My Father is looking for worshippers like you. We are not talking about religion. We're not talking about a temple. We're not talking about a well. We're not talking about a sacred mountain. We're not talking about rituals. We're not talking about sacrifices. My Father is on a mission. He's looking for true worshippers who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And I am saying to you, you qualify, because God gives grace to the humble. You thought your sexual immorality and all of your shame has disqualified you. I've come to say you qualify for grace. No more hiddenness, no more secrecy, no more coming to the well in the middle of the day. The truth has set you free. And the truth is more than facts and figures. Jesus is truth, and he's come to pursue this woman. You see, at the end of the day, we are all spiritually dehydrated. We're going to some sort of well. We're going to the religion well. Maybe if I go to this particular religion and I try and do the right thing in the right place at the right time with the right people, maybe then I will feel spiritually replenished. Maybe it's an addiction. It could be work. It could be money. It could be self-help. If I go to this conference, if I read these books and then go back to another conference, maybe then I will feel satisfied. Go to any of those wells and your thirst will be quenched for a moment. And then you'll be thirsty again and again and again. But if we go to the Jesus well, we will read these words: let anyone who is thirsty come to Jesus and drink. Whoever believes in Jesus, as scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them. For this Samaritan woman, there was a time her life was overwhelmed with her immorality, the fact that she's a Samaritan, she's a woman, she doesn't belong, she's despised. All of this overwhelmed her, feeling so inferior. But when she met Jesus and drank from the Jesus well, she was overwhelmed with grace and forgiveness. So much so, she went back to the village and said to everyone, come and meet Jesus, and you too can have your deepest thirst quench. Where sin abounds, grace abounds much more. Where there is shame, there is always more grace. Drink from the Jesus well. God bless you.